All right, so now that we have our character all textured and what we could probably consider done, it's time to actually preview what this really looks like. Normally, I would do this iteratively and we'd do it along the way with rendering, but we kind of held off on this one just to get through the basic map so you can see the full process. And so we could get to the climax here, which is talking about rendering and presentation of the character. So we're going to navigate up here to Arnold and we're going to do a render, and we're going to talk about something that happens when you have textures. So we're just going to come to our render menu here, open this up. You'll see it's taking a moment here to process this. So what's going on here? You might notice it takes a moment to launch. So what it's doing is it's creating TX files. So let's look at that. If we take a look in our source images file now, under our characters, robot, and textures, you're going to notice that these various TX files have been generated for each of the maps. What these are basically cached files that allows Arnold to render faster the next time around. The downside to these is they interrupt our ability to kind of live adjust our texture in Photoshop and save. So for example, if I were to save right now, what would happen is Photoshop would give me an error saying that the file is in use. So since Maya is referencing the file and the TX file is mirroring that file or copying it, what it ends up doing is creating a live connection. So we end up having to do some interesting workarounds to kind of get the preview to work. So what I like to do is try and get it to look as good as possible inside the viewport using the standard surface shader. And then afterwards, if I need to make adjustments, there's a lot of weird workarounds you can do. One thing you can do is you can close Maya, you can delete these TX files. You could also save different versions. For example, if I made Robot Color version 2 and then I overrode that, you could swap between the version 1 and version 2 usually. So just be aware of that. But that is going to be what took a little bit longer there when it was just starting out. But we can see now how our robot looks in all its beautiful robot glory here. And it's looking pretty good. You can see it looks a bit better than our viewport. They're pretty close though, in all honesty, especially with our lighting setup. But we might notice when we get in close here, we have some differences because what we have going on here is the reflectivity. So this is one of those things that doesn't really show up in our viewport, is the reflections of objects. So if you take a look right here, you'll see that the main ball is reflecting onto the metal and the metal is reflecting onto the main ball. That's going to be one of those big things we don't get. Also, you can see some occlusion going on here. Those are things we miss out on. You can see the reflectivity here pretty good on the screen. So we have that going pretty well. So I like it. I think that is a good start. And we can just investigate this further. But the best way to do that is to actually render out something called a turntable. Now, we want to make sure our render settings are decent. So just to overview what I like to use for turntables, the Arnold, you want to keep relatively low. You don't want to go crazy here. So just to recap, I set mine to a AA of 3 with a diffuse and specular of 4. Remember, those are going to be a huge factor in moving grain. In addition to that, with my sky dome light, I set my samples to 4. You can bump that to 6 or 8 if you can remove some of the grain or if you want to. And with the directional light, I have this just set to an intensity of 3. And if we come down into the Arnold settings here, we'll see that it has a setting of 2 in the samples here. So what we're going to do now is create something called a turntable. When we deal with turntables, a turntable is a 360-degree turn of a character, and this is quite often used to present the final textures to the art director for approval. And it's also good to just do ourselves, because even though we've really been looking at this and we've been rotating this around here, there's things we may not notice until we actually render this out. So let's get that set up. The first thing I'm going to do is save. I'm going to do a file, save scene as. And I'm just going to save this out as a turntable file. So we have a texturing file. I might create a new folder and name this turntable. And we'll make this robot model underscore turntable 01, because we might have to do multiple depending on the approval. And what we're going to do is we're going to group this. So what I usually like to do is create a group of the character, just Control G. So this is all nested under a group, and that group should be at the center of the character. If it's not at the center, you can center it using modify center pivot, and that will go to the center. Our character is centered, so that's pretty easy. And then we're going to create a 360-degree rotation for about 150 frames. Usually 150 to 180 frames is enough for a character. It depends on the character's complexity and detail. This is a pretty simple character, so I think 150 will work out okay. So let's go ahead and change this down here to be 150 on our time slider. And setting this up is pretty simple. We'll want to turn on our channel box because we are animating, and we're going to need to keyframe a channel. And on frame 1 here, I want to select the group, which I can name Turntable, and hit the S key. So on frame 1, we have this keyed at 000. Then we're going to move time over here to 150 to set our next keyframe, so all the way to the end. And on rotate Y, we're going to type in 360 and hit enter, and then hit S. So what's going to happen is this is going to rotate 360 degrees. Now you might be thinking, wait, we didn't even see that thing move. And that is exactly what we're going for. Basic geometry, if we're talking about angles, 360 degree completes a perfect circle. So now if we hit play, this will be rotating in a circle. You'll notice it's a bit quick, and that's because I haven't switched my playback speed. But what I also want you to notice that it currently has slow in and slow out, which is something we don't want. And that's a lot easier to see with this sped up. So how do we remove slow in, slow out? So try and jog your memory and think about how we get rid of that. The way we get rid of it is using the animation graph editor. So we're going to come up here to Windows, Animation Editors, and Graph Editor. Open this up. And if we go ahead and select our turntable, you'll see it loads in. And we can just set this to be linear. Remember, linear removes ease in, ease out. We use that on the ball project when we were doing the z-axis. And that'll make it a straight line, so it just progresses at a consistent rate. So if you want to get that really nice lazy Susan sort of effect where it's just spinning continuously, this is how to do it. Now, if I close this out and hit play, you'll see that this is spinning constantly at a rapid rate. So now if they were to loop this video, it would loop correctly. But it's still a little bit too fast. So let's fix that up. Over here in the render settings, we can come in here and we can change that playback speed. You may not have to. I deleted my preferences since then to kind of refresh my settings. So that way I have a fresh Maya every time. So if I run into any settings that I've changed, it's not changed for you guys on your end. For the playback speed, remember we can keep this at play every frame, but we're going to switch the max playback speed to 24 frames per second times 1. Save. And then close. And if we hit play now, you'll see we get this nice turntable showing off our character. Now, when presenting, this is usually good enough, but sometimes people do like to keep the shadows and the highlights from rotating on the character. You notice how the highlights constantly rotating across the surface. Sometimes that's considered undesirable. It just depends on your presentation and in some ways what looks best. If you want to get rid of that, you can actually just take your lights and nest them under this turntable. Now, remember, this turntable is what's being animated, so we can nest anything underneath it. We don't really need to worry about re-keyframing, anything like that. It's kind of like what we looked at with our rig. And if we just take the middle mouse button and drag here and hover over turntable to where it's highlighted, we can drop these in, and now it will rotate with it. But I'm going to hit Control Z because I want this to be at 0 when I do this. That way they're not at a weird angle. I can drop that in, and if I hit play now, you'll see the highlights shouldn't move as much because the light's traveling with the character. And sometimes this is a more professional way to present it with the lighting if you have a nice evenly lit scene like this. So that's going to get our turntable set up. So what we're going to need to do next is investigate how we can render this out using Arnold. So we're going to take a look at how to do a rendered sequence with Arnold next, which will take a bit, just so you know. As a challenge, what I want you to do is I want you to go ahead and set up a turntable for your own character. That way you can produce a rendered image sequence of it that we can present to anyone. In this case, it's going to be ourselves, but professionally be the art director. Likewise, this is the type of stuff you also put on your portfolio. So it's good to have these, especially if you're just starting out. It's not the most amazing model in the world, but it does show some texture work. And if there's a low-end job opportunity or an internship opportunity, it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it, right? So I encourage you to do this step to render this out, have it on hand so you can use it later. Okay, so go ahead and set up your turntable, and we're going to look at how we can get it out of here next.